Nice to be here. Nice to see you all. Did Emma do greetings from North London? I've done it now, so that's greetings from North London done as well. So that's cool. This is going to get in the way, isn't it? Right. So nice to see you all. So yeah, Emma's very good at doing all that talking to people stuff. I'm not as good as Emma at doing that. I get, believe it or not, I do get a little bit shy when it comes to. It's easier. Sometimes it's easier to stand at the front and do sort of big things than sit and have one-to-one conversations with people. And I'm always worried I'll talk too much and no one will get a word in edgeways. So I leave that back to Emma. Okay, so title of the, and also I'm get a bit confused because in North London we do the spiritual gifts and communion before the talk, and so I'm a bit confused as to what order I'm doing things. But I do the talk now, don't I? Yep. Looking Ruby. If I do anything wrong, just let me know. Okay, so the title of the talk. Do you have titles for your talks? Yeah. And Pastor Jimmy also says he usually talks for about an hour and a half. Is that about right? No? Okay, I'll try and keep it short. So the title of the talk is Courage is Contagious. So in this sort of post-COVID era, the word contagious has usually got a negative sort of connotation, but in this sense it's a positive one, and it's just talking about how we're going to look at how courage is a contagious thing, and we can pass courage on to one another. So we're going to start off in 2 Samuel chapter 10. Look at a little story here. 2 Samuel chapter 10. Charles is taking notes, so I'll check later to make sure they're accurate. Good stuff. It's a really cool little story. It's not one that we look at very often, this one. So I really like this. So verse 1. It's the story of David, King David. It says, "And it came to pass after this that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his stead. And then said David, I will show kindness unto Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. And David sent to comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon." And so I looked back, I've looked far and wide throughout my Bible to see if I can find this incident where Nahash, the father of Hanun, the king of Ammon, lots of funny names there, all end in un. I don't know if everyone in Ammon ended in un, but these two certainly did. But I looked back to see if I could find this particular incident where he helped him, and I couldn't find anything specific, but I suspect it was when David was fleeing from Saul, when at some point in the midst of that, because I know quite often David got caught up with Israel's enemies a little bit, really, and they helped him a little bit, bizarrely, in some situations, like the Philistines. He spent some time with the Philistines, and so I guess it's in there, but it doesn't say specifically. But obviously it had an effect on David. He remembered this kindness that this man had shown him, and so when this man died, the king of Ammon, he said, right, I'm going to go and show some kindness to his son. That's a good thing to do, isn't it? To remember something and to go and see if you can repay a kindness to them. So verse 3 says, "And the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanun, their lord, say, thinkest thou that David does honour thy father, that he has sent comforters unto thee? Has not David rather sent his servants unto thee to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it?" So David had done a good thing. I don't know if you're ever in a situation where you've done something you think is a good thing, but it backfires a little bit, and you feel like you've sort of, this isn't fair. I'm trying to do a good thing. So David had sent his servants to go and comfort this man because his father had died, but this man's advisors said to him, I don't think he's coming to comfort you. He's coming because he wants to rob you. He wants to come and steal stuff from you. And this man stupidly believed his advisors rather than David. Verse 4. In fact, I'm going to let you read verse 4 because there's a word in there that I can't bring myself to say from the front here. So I'm going to let you read that on your own. Just can't bring myself to read it out. But they basically ended up looking really, really stupid. He basically shamed these people. If someone else wants to come and stand here and read that verse, they're welcome to. I just can't bring myself to say that from the front here. But he basically made them look stupid. He cut off their garments and he sent them their beards, and he made them look stupid and feel really silly. And then in verse 5, we'll take it up on there. And when they told it unto David, he said unto them, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, tarry at Jericho until your beards be grown, and then return. And obviously they would have put on some clothes as well. And then the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David. It's a great description, isn't it, of how what David thought of these people. It says he saw that they stank. In this story is actually also recorded in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles chapter 19, and there it says that they were odious in his sight, that he thought they were odious, but here it says they stank. That was what he thought of them before David. And the children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and of King Maacah 1,000 men, and of Ishtob 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. So this really is, it's quite annoying, I suppose, in a way, because you think that what had happened is that David had tried to do this good thing. This man had misunderstood it, and as a result of this, you've got a battle coming on. You've got tens of thousands of people coming to fight each other just because of a misunderstanding when David's trying to do a good thing. I don't know if you ever, I doubt anyone here has had a misunderstanding that's led to a war, but sometimes you have a little bit of a misunderstanding and it causes a bit more of a problem than you thought it would. And it's a bit, you sort of think, why did I even bother to try and do a good thing? Because it's backfired in this way. And I'm sure we've all had, if you sort of sat and thought about it, you realise that things like that happen sometimes. But David didn't. David was reacting to this battle. This king, he pulled all his troops together. David reacted by sending his men together. Verse 8. I'll just read a little bit more. It says, the children of Ammon came out and put the battle in array at the entering in of the gate, and the Syrians of Zobah and Rehob and Ishtob and Maacah were by themselves in the field. And when Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him before and behind, he chose all the choice men of Israel and put them in array against the Syrians. And the rest of the people he delivered into the hand of Abishai, his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. And he said, if the Syrians be too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon be too strong for thee, then I will come and help thee. And so this is the situation, is you've got these two brothers, Joab and I've forgotten his name, Abishai. Joab and Abishai, the two brothers who were the leaders of David's army, and they were surrounded by the Syrians and the children of Ammon. And Joab was a very smart warrior, a very smart soldier, and he basically said to his brother, you take all your troops over there and you face them, and I'll take my troops over here and I'll face this army, and if I'm struggling, you come and help me, and if you're struggling, I come and help you. And he had this sort of great bit of tactics, and it was almost like he sort of set out his school, because he was a very smart soldier. And that's where I want to get to this point now of courage. Okay, so this has all started from a misunderstanding, and sometimes with a misunderstanding, it's easy to get a bit upset with it. But what David and his men decided, they were going to be courageous. And it says and what got me into this story is I found this verse, verse 12, and I just absolutely love this verse. It says, be of good courage, and let us play the men for our people, and the cities of our God, and the Lord do that which seemeth good unto him, which seemeth him good. It's a really interesting verse. When I read it, I thought, what does that mean? Be of good courage, and let us play the men for our people. What does it actually mean? It's an unusual phrase. If you look in the original Hebrew, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I do have a concordance, and also have eSword, so you can look these things up. So you can look this up later for you, if you like. That first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11 words of that verse are actually two words in Hebrew. And those two words are the same word. So it's just the same word repeated twice. So where it says, be of good courage and let us play the men for our people, It actually is just the same word repeated twice in Hebrew. And that word is courage. He says, courage, courage for the men. And what he's basically saying, this is Joab speaking to his brother. It's like a little team talk before the battle. He says, you have courage. We need to have courage. So you have courage. But also, we need to look courageous for the sake of the people. We're surrounded. Don't look. If you look afraid, it's not going to be good for the people. Courage is contagious. Courage and courageous. Courage is courageous and contagious. There you go. There's the longer title if you want to write that down for your notes. No, you don't have to. But courage is contagious. And so I love the idea that he's saying, you'd only say to someone, be of good courage if you were a bit worried yourself, wouldn't you? If you're a bit like, I'm scared of this situation. I've got these soldiers here. They outnumbered them. There were 42,000 men on chariots. Incredible. 32,000. I mean, he was counting 10,000 when you got that many. Yeah, 32,000 men on chariots facing them. Right, that's a huge number. And he says, be of good courage. In the First Chronicles one, it says, it's translated this way. It says, be of good courage and let us behave ourselves valiantly for our people and for the cities of our God. And so they're just trying to encourage one another. But this is the bit I want you to remember. Be strong for each other as well, because that's what he was telling them to do. Where this came, this sort of what it got me thinking about was, who knows Nathan and Mel in our fellowship, in North London Fellowship? They've got a little girl called Lara. Well, Lara, when she was very, very little, I was talking to Lara. She's my favourite, Lara, because she's got quite a character. You're not supposed to have favourites, but Lara's really cool, yeah? And we're talking to her, and I can't remember what happened, but she said to me, play nicely. I was probably obviously getting a bit rowdy. Play nicely. And I sort of take this as this thing really. Let's play, because he says play for the people. Let's do this the right way. Let's play this the right way. Let's be involved for the right way. And then verse 12, and then the other bit, the end of verse 12, it says, and the Lord do that which seemeth him good. So he's saying, what he's basically saying, and this is the message today really, is if I'm courageous and I'm going to be courageous for the sake of everyone else, God will look after everything else. Whatever God decides to do, let him do that. That's not my problem, because all I've got to do is be courageous. And all I've got to do for one another is be courageous. Support one another. Be the best you can be yourself and support one another. That's our calling as brothers and sisters, as a fellowship. We are in a war. We are in a battle. The world is out to get us, and it's not fighting like this as it was in those days. But it's equally dangerous. It can take your life spiritually if you're not careful. It's important we remember that. And the other thing that I really like about this story is that they weren't worrying about how they got into this mess. Look, why are we here? Because we tried to do a good thing and it backfired and it all became a mess. The past is the past. We are where we are today. We're in this situation. Let's get on and do what we need to do. Be courageous. God will deal with everything else. And I just think, isn't that the only approach we should ever take in life? It's very easy to have regrets. It's very easy to worry about this wasn't fair or that wasn't fair, or if I'd done that wouldn't have happened, or I wish I hadn't been in this situation, or whatever. All those things. It's easy to think on that. But we are where we are today. There is a solution. God will bring about what he thinks is best if we just do our bit. Right, so let's go to Acts chapter 8. No, we're not. We're going to go to Psalm 34. Emma was talking about her her mum earlier. I realised as well, talking to Lara and talking to Emma's mum, the only two sets of people that actually value the moment are very young people and much older people. Emma's mum's 88, yeah? Because the very old people are very conscious of their lifespan. The very young people haven't got any, unless their birthday's coming up, they don't understand tomorrow. They don't think about tomorrow. They think about now, fun. That's the only thing in their head. There's no idea of consequence. It's now fun. When you become these fine young people sitting at the front, they're starting to worry about, they're getting that age where they start to worry about tomorrow. And, oh no, it's Monday, it's school tomorrow. It occupies a bit of their mind more than it did when they were younger. All us middle-aged people, I like to count myself in there, which is basically everyone else in the room, apart from this few young people died at the end. I don't mean you, Wallasey, you're not. You're well into middle age like me. We spend far too much of our time and our energy worrying about tomorrow and worrying about regret. All of us do. It's just not worth it. It really isn't worth it. We need to be like Lara. Play nicely. Deal with today. Be courageous. Encourage one another to do the same. That's our job. That's our role. That's where we should be. I love this in Psalm 134. This is another. It's actually, if you've got the little bit at the beginning, it says a Psalm of David when he changed his behaviour before Abimelech, who drave him away, and he departed. You can go and look that up. That little story. It was Abimelech was a king of the Philistines, and he had to go and basically pretend to be mad in order to get through a particular situation. So interesting little story. But this is, so you can go and look into these things sometimes, the thought process that was going on people's heads at the time of writing them. But this is, we'll just read a few of these verses here. Remembering David was in a pretty stressful situation when he wrote this. He says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul shall make her boast in the Lord. The humble shall hear thereof and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened. Their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. This is a man in dire straits. Not the band. This is a man in serious trouble. Okay, it says the angel of the Lord encampeth around about them that fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusts in him. O fear the Lord, ye his saints. There is no want to them that fear him. Great stuff. Taste and see that the Lord is good. He's tested it. He's seen that God's good, even though he was in this situation, which was really dire. He knew that God would bring him through. He knew it. That's where his courage was. He says, "There's no want no one lacks anything if they fear God." We might feel like we do. He was in a pretty bad situation at the time, but he says, "Taste and see." You can take hold of this. When you're faced by enemies that side and that side, you can have courage, because God's given it to you. Acts 8. I'm going to read a fair few sort of verses here, and you'll know the story very well. It's the story of Philip when he meets the eunuch in the chariot. Verse 27. It says, "And he rose and went and beheld a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all their treasure, and had come to Jerusalem to worship. He was returning and sitting in his chariot and reading Isaiah the prophet. And the Spirit said unto Philip, Go near and join thyself to this chariot. And Philip ran hither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah and said, Understandest thou what thou readest? And he said, How can I, except some man should guide me? And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. And the place of the scripture which he read was this: He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer, so opened he not his mouth. In his humiliation his judgment was taken away. Who should declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth. So this guy is, the Queen of Candace, I'm not a historian, I can't tell you that much about her, but this man had a high position, this eunuch. He had a high position in this foreign queen's court, this Ethiopian queen's court. He was probably wealthy. He probably had influence. He probably had a religious background that was attached to that queen. There was probably lots and lots of baggage, if you like. I'm not just talking the stuff that he had in the chariot. There's probably lots of history to that man's life, and a lot of sort of guesswork there. I don't know for certain, but you can imagine this man was quite a noble. He was quite an important person and had lots of things going on in his life, and for some reason he's reading the book of Isaiah, but he says to Philip, so he asks Philip to read this with him, and the eunuch, verse 34, the eunuch answered Philip and said, I pray thee, of whom speaks the prophet this, of himself or some other man? And Philip opened his mouth and began at the same scripture and preached unto him Jesus. And as they went on their way, they came to certain water, and the eunuch said, See, here is water. What does hinder me to be baptized? And Philip said, If thou believest with all thine heart, and thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And he commanded the chariot to stand still, and they went down into the water, both Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. And I was just sort of thinking, we know this story really well, but that took courage on both parts to do, because that man had all that stuff going on in his background. Emma said in her testimony there about the past she'd come from, and she found something missing in it. This man's obviously searching, reading scriptures, but he hadn't heard of these things before because Philip opened his eyes as to what it was. It would have been a complete change in his mind to do it. And for Philip, it would have been a bold thing to do, to go and step up and take hold of that opportunity to speak. There's a proverb. We've got time, actually, because I've been going a bit quicker than I thought I would. Let's go to this proverb, chapter 10. I was just going to quote it, but I need a few more things for Charles to write down, so I won't. He hasn't written enough yet, and he's drawn a little diagram. Oh no, it looks like it's actually, it looks like it makes sense. Yep. So Proverbs 10. So the eunuch, he heard something that was different to what he believed. Yeah. So he had this history, he had this belief. It takes courage to read something, to be taught something, to be told something is different to what you think it is, and to go and change your mind. We will all have stuff in our head where we know what the Bible says, but our brains, our head will sometimes tell us things that are not to... I was thinking about this the other day. We've got a young lad that's coming along to our fellowship at the moment, a guy called Brandon, who's 21, 22. And he... I've been really trying to get this into my head to try and explain this to him. Where I've sort of gone with it, he asks lots of questions. And I've said and what I've sort of come to, and this is what I've written down for my next conversation with him, is ask God questions, but don't question God. Can you see the difference? Yeah, it's fine to ask God a question, but don't question him when he gives you an answer. Don't say, I can't get my head around that. There's a big difference, because in our hearts, we fight against God, because every single situation we're in, every single one, the Bible does have an answer. Every single time you sometimes when we pray for things, we think, I've not had my answer yet. I've been in the Lord 30 years. I have never, ever heard God not answer my prayer. Sometimes it's not the answer I want, but he always answers prayer. That is a fact. Always answers prayer. Sometimes we don't hear it because it's not what we want him to say. And sometimes an answer to prayer isn't like, Lord, I want this thing. Sometimes the answer is no. That is an answer to prayer. Sometimes that's not good for you. That's not the same as getting answers. Sometimes the answer is, I want you to be like this, or I want you to change this thing about you. I want you to go and look deeply inside and see what's really important to you. Sometimes that's the answer. It's not the, I'll give you this. Getting things isn't answers to prayer. Hearing the answer is the answer to prayer. And this is a really interesting verse. So Proverbs 10 verse 8, it says, the wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. Two different versions of fall there. If you're wise in heart, you will hear instructions, but prating in this sense just means talking too much. Yeah. If we prefer to talk than to listen, especially when it comes to God, we spend more time telling God what we want and talking to God about things than listening to what he has to say. It's a dangerous thing sometimes. And God will always give you an answer if you hear him. Absolutely promise you that. Let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 10, where we started. Because we didn't finish off the battle, did we? We didn't find out who won. Are you interested to know who won? So you've got all the Syrians on that side and all their chariots. You've got the children of Ammon on that side with all their tens of thousands of men. And you've got Abishai and Joab. They're two there. And they said, look, if you're struggling, then I'll come and help you. If you're struggling, I'll come and help you. And the battle's about to start. And they've said, be of good courage. We're scared. I'm scared, but be of good courage because we've got to be courageous for each other. And God will do what God will do. In verse 14. Verse 12, we'll read that one. It says, be of good courage and let us play the men for our people and for the cities of our God. And the Lord do that which seemeth him good. And Joab drew nigh, and the people that were with him unto the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the children of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fled, they fled also before Abishai and entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. There was no fight. They were building themselves up and worrying over nothing. Because that's what God decided to do. But the point is, they still had to be courageous. They still had to encourage one another because they'd built it up into their heads. They'd seen what was in front of them. And God said, just be courageous. I'll look after it. That's all we have to do in every situation. Be courageous. Make a stand, even if you're afraid, and God will deal with it. Other times, there will be a fight. You'll win. But that's sometimes the situation as well. Let's follow the formula because God's involved. Let's play within the rules. Let's listen when God tells us stuff. Let's trust him, hear him and trust him. Important step to do it that way. Hear God and then trust what God says. If God says stand, stand. If he says fall back, fall back. If he says follow, follow. Whatever God says, and it's different each time. That's why we have to listen to him. We can't just assume. We have to listen to him. We do what he says. We'll be brave. We'll be bold. We'll speak a testimony. There were times when Jesus disappeared from amongst the people. You think that Jesus was always bold. There were times when he went and people were after him, and he disappeared. It wasn't his time to face them. It's not always the right thing to stand up and face people. Sometimes it's better to just quietly disappear. There was times when Paul had to be lowered. The people were trying to kill Paul. They put him in a basket and lowered him over the wall to escape. He had to have I think it was an army of 200 soldiers to escort him out of the city. because it wasn't safe for him. So sometimes it is the right thing to do to just move on and leave things behind. Sometimes it's the right thing to stop and fight. But we're always courageous, and we always have to listen to God. So I'm going to finish up with, this is a really short talk, isn't it? Unless I'm going to think of something else to say in the meantime. We're going to think up, because I suppose there's a good question here is, how do we know what God is telling us to do in any given situation? How do you actually know? How do you know what God's telling you to do? So let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 4, because this is practical advice that we could all do well to listen to. Because we're too fast to react. We're too quick to let our emotions get in the way. We're too quick to do it our way rather than God's way. But this is valuable for all of us. And it does actually talk about young people here. So I'm looking at everyone, right? Not just these fine people in the front and the one or two that died round at the back. Still not you, Wallasey. You still don't make it. But it is to everyone, okay? This is to everyone, even Wallasey, even old people. I don't know why I'm picking on him. He's twice my size. I can't help myself. So Timothy, I've always loved these verses. So 1 Timothy chapter 4, did I say that? Verse 12. And this is Paul writing to Timothy, this young guy who's looking after this church. He says, let no man despise thy youth. So it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're young. It doesn't matter who you are. He's saying, don't worry, don't feel that you haven't got anything to give because you're a young person. Don't feel that you haven't got any access to God yourself because you're a young person. Don't feel that. This is important. You are just as strong, just as important as anyone else in the fellowship. That's what he's basically saying to Timothy here. He says, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers. Have courage. Show courage to other people. Be an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. So all those things, you could write those down in a list. This would be a good thing to do when you're having a sort of quiet time of prayer. Just write those things down in a list. Word, conversation, charity, spirit, faith, and purity. And just ask yourself, how do I do in each of these categories? The things I speak about. Conversation isn't, are you good at having conversations like Emma is? And I'm not. We'll get better. It's how you live your life. Do I do well in that? Am I a good example in the way I live myself? Am I a good example in love, one to me, my brothers and sisters? Am I a good example of a spirit-filled person? Am I an example of a faithful person? Am I a pure person? Do I show that in my testimony? You could write this down and think about it, because this is practical advice which will get results if you pay attention to it. It will get results. That's why Paul's writing it to Timothy, because he was a man that needed encouragement, and he wanted to give him courage. So he says, be an example of the believers in these things. And then he says, till I come, until I see you again, give attendance to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Give attendance doesn't mean show up. It means apply yourself. It's not saying apply yourself, not just come along, not attend. Apply yourself to these things, to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Neglect not the gift that is given thee, that is in thee, that was given thee by prophecy with the laying on of the hands of the presbytery. That's just talking about when he received the Holy Spirit with people laying hands on him. And he's saying, don't neglect the Holy Spirit that's within you. Verse 15, meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. This is practical advice. You can't get better advice than this. Meditate, think about these things that you've got, about how you are. And then verse 16, it says, take heed unto thyself and to the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt save both thyself and them that hear you. I just can't think of better advice to give anyone, whether it is a young person like he was specifically writing to here, or to the rest of us, who the same advice applies. If you take hold of these things, we had a prayer and fast last weekend, and the theme was resting in the Lord. And we were just what we were really focusing on was taking time out to rest in God, to really think about what you've got. And the bit I really took away from it is to rest on purpose. Sometimes if you've had a really busy week and you come home, or you've had a really busy day, you come home and I just need to rest. I'm going to chill out. I'm just going to chuck the telly on, and next thing you know, you've wasted the evening watching rubbish. There's nothing wrong with telly, by the way. But we've done that, don't you? That's not resting on purpose. That's just being exhausted. Resting on purpose is when you say, right, I'm going to go to bed early tonight because I know I need a good night's sleep because I've got a busy day tomorrow. That's resting on purpose. Spiritually, it's spiritually having a bad day and sitting home and just slumping in front of the telly is like, I haven't had prayer, I better pray. Or when I get to the meeting, Pastor Jimmy will ask me if I prayed. When I tell him all my problems, and he'll say, have you prayed about it? And I'll say, yeah, I did. Because I'll have 5 minutes prayer now just to fit that in, so at least I can tell him the truth. That's that. Whereas spiritually resting on purpose is saying, right, I'm going to put aside some time to go through and say, what sort of person am I? Is there any way I can improve in the way I am? Is there somebody I can be talking to that I've not really shown my testimony to outside of the meeting? Take heed to yourself, he says here in verse 16. Pay attention to your own walk and to the doctrine. Make sure you're clear on what's right and what's wrong. Continue in this, for in doing this you will save yourself and them that hear you. You'll take courage and be courageous for other people as well. And then you've got to face a battle. It's that side. It's all around us. The world is closing in. And I believe that the world is closing in and it's a dangerous place, because of the things that are going on. But I believe Jesus is going to come back and sort it out before we actually have to fight. But it is still closing in and it's frightening. I get a bit frightened sometimes to look at the world, and I've mentioned the young people a few times, but I wouldn't want to have to deal with what you guys deal with in the world. It's hard. And I admire the fact that the young people are still standing in the fellowship. I admire it. It's a really admirable thing because the world's a tough place, and it is. And I do admire it, and it's a great testimony to others as well. I'm looking at the front. I do mean to look at the back at the young people there as well. It's just that can't see you. But do think about these things. Take hold of them. It's really, really important. And just because you've listened so attentively, and Charles has written so many notes, unless he's just writing something, doing his homework or something, he might be. I'm going to let you have a short talk today so you can have a bit longer for lunch. Okay, so all people said.